All right, welcome to the Krug Show. Friday morning, Chase Sr. is in the house. Let's go. We got a lot to get to. Are the Niners going to show up in New York? To me, I think this is the biggest game of the year. So let's get to it right here. Off and running on the Krug Show on a Friday. I'm here at Levi's. Chase Sr. is in his studio. Welcome to the Krug Show, brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Also, 49er football season all season long is presented by Sleeper, the fastest growing fantasy platform in the world. It's a one-stop shop. You get blazing fast news, real-time chat, real-time stats, group chat, season-long leagues, and, of course, Sleeper picks for daily fantasy. Use promo code Larry. Sleeper will match your first deposit up to $100. Links in the description. Terms and conditions do apply. Who will win Niners-Giants? I do think this is the game of the year for the 49ers, Chase, because I think it can go either way. The Niners looked really bad last week. Colton McKivitz got whipped up front by Will Anderson. Houston's defense dominated the 49ers offense. Shanahan and Kubiak just absolutely sitting there, couldn't do anything against Houston. And then in addition to that, Robert Saleh's defense was absolutely a joke. No pass rush at all kinds of space all over the field. Then mix in busted play after busted play. And the 49ers looked horrible. As good as they looked against Atlanta, they looked worse than that against Houston. Now they're playing a New York Giants team that just got their doors blown off by the Eagles in Philly, as Philly just ran the ball at will. Two backs went over 10 yards a carry. They ran for almost 300 yards. It doesn't mean that's what's going to happen this week. I think the Niners could lose this game to the Giants, have no pressure on Dart, and just fall behind the Giants and get crushed by their defensive line in the second half. Or I could see the Niners running the ball at will, building up a 28-point margin and, bouncing back defensively, confusing the young Jackson Dart, and the 49ers winning 28-10 or 28-13. This game can go either way. And if the Niners win 28-10, I think they got to then watch out for the Niners as a contender in the NFC the rest of the year. If the Niners lose 28-10, then it's all over. I mean, it literally is all over. The season won't be over, but it will be over for them as far as being a real Super Bowl contender. That's a lot of people would say that's knee jerk, but that's how I feel. Not every game is defining. I believe this one is.
First of all, it's great to join you. It's been a little while since we've done a Friday show together on the Krug Show because you've been so busy on KNBR, and I've obviously joined you on a couple of occasions on the Sports Leader, but we haven't done our Friday spot in a little while. So it's great to be here with you and everybody else. And I agree. This is a huge game for San Francisco. And you think about the difference, Larry, between 6-3 and 5-4. That is a 2-game swing in the Niners' hopes to keep their heads above water and the back half of the season going on a little bit of a run and prove that they can be a playoff team. And I know some people have said, look, even if they make it to the playoffs, they have a ceiling. You get into the dance with this coaching staff, anything is possible. And you get into the playoffs in some of these one-score games. We've seen how San Francisco's been able to win them this year, whereas last year they lost them. I would take the Niners' chances with Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh, given their playoff track record, not talking about Super Bowls, obviously, against a lot of the teams across the NFC. Another thing that I think is really valuable is getting this young team playoff experience. If you can get some of these rookies and young players playoff reps where they get to experience the preparation into the game, the environment of the game, being in the pressure cooker, and seeing what playoff physicality, speed, and intensity is like, I also think that's really valuable. And so I agree with you. This is a huge game for San Francisco for all of those reasons, but also they get to 6-3. And I think it convinces John Lynch, we can go out there and we can make a move prior to Tuesday's NFL trade deadline. And I imagine we're going to talk about some of the moves that the Niners can make at some point. You think about this Giants team, tails kicked against the Eagles last week. Birds win that game 38-20. And on the second play of the game, Saquon Barkley runs for 65 yards. He ran for a $150. Tank Bigsby, who had done nothing all year long, he went over 100 yards. It was the first time that the Eagles have had two players with 100+ yards in a game in 12 years. And so this Niners team, to your point, got their asses kicked against the Texans defense. I thought DeMeco Ryans outcoached Kyle Shanahan. Their defensive line was able to really beat up on this Niners offensive line, which continues to get exposed against some really good teams. A key to this game, two of them actually, is this Niners offensive line against the Giants front, which is one of the best in the NFL from a talent perspective. You have Kayvon Thibodeau, who is a good trade target for the Niners. You have Brian Burns, who already has 10 sacks this year. You have Dexter Lawrence and Abdul Carter. And so what they've been doing is kind of like what Robert Saleh likes to do, because they have so many defensive ends and such great talent there. They'll line up some of those players over guards. And we know that the guard play and the center play for the Niners has been weak this season. And so that's a huge matchup in this game. Giants defensive line against the Niners offensive line. The other thing is the Niners rushing offense against the Giants rushing defense. And obviously we both alluded to it, but the Giants run defense this year, yards per carry allowed, dead last in the NFL. EPA per rush allowed, number 32 in the NFL. Success rate allowed, number 32 in the NFL. Outside of the Atlanta game, though, this is a Niners offense that has not been able to run the football. And DeMeco Ryans clearly wanted to stop the run and shut down Christian McCaffrey last week. He was able to do that. Can the Niners do what they did against Atlanta? If they can find success on the ground with some of that power and gap scheme, and they can find success running the football, I like the Niners' chances. But if they can't run it, and the Giants defensive line is able to own the Niners offensive line, that could spell disaster for the Niners. The two games that Mac Jones has lost this year, against Tampa Bay and against Houston, there have been two constants, two consistencies, two themes in those games. The Bucs defensive line and the Texans defensive line was able to steamroll this Niners offensive line.
Niners offensive line, just absolutely got worked last week. And yet I expected that, but I didn't expect the 49ers to have, 4 or 5 busts on defense, 0 pass rush at all, soft coverage. If anything, they should have just been hugged up on these receivers and, take away their space. I asked Robert Saleh about it yesterday, and he said he blamed himself. He took the blame. He's like, I put him in bad spots and this and that. I think he's covering his guys. I don't think he put them in bad spots. I just don't think his guys either have the confidence or the ability to play tight man coverage. And I mean, it was the soft coverage last week was just unacceptable.
Yeah.
I mean, CJ Stroud the week before against Seattle, they challenged everything he did. And in this game, he would throw, passes to guys who were, the defender was 5 yards down the field. I mean, how much can you back up? How much can you retreat? How much space, how much, how much land can you give up before you finally put your foot down and say no more? The Niners better be a whole lot better coverage wise this week, or it's curtains. Now, this is also the last game before the trade deadline. I'm going to share the screen on this, so get your thoughts on this. This is interesting. Now, I'm not putting any credence in this because I don't know if this is a credible site, but this NFL rumor site says the 49ers are expected to go all in to try to land Bengals defensive end Trey Hendrickson. There's also a report out that the Eagles are willing to trade 3 number 1s to Cleveland for Myles Garrett. I'll ask you about both. Do you think either happens? Do you think the Niners get Hendrickson, or do you think the Eagles get Garrett before November 4th?
So the Bengals play the Chicago Bears on Sunday, and I think that's going to be a big game which decides the direction that the Bengals are going to go in. If they win, they're in the thick of things in a crazy AFC North, where the Ravens just won on Thursday night. The Steelers started off well. They've started to trip up over the last couple of games. The Browns have 2 wins, and the Bengals now have 3 wins. And so the Bengals thinking if they can beat Chicago might be, hey, we have a shot. And in the month of November, can we keep our heads above water? can we hover around 500 so that if Joe Burrow comes back in December, we've got an opportunity to make it to the playoffs? And I'm telling you right now, Larry, you know this too. If Joe Burrow comes back, plays well, and the Bengals make it into the playoffs, the Bills, the Colts, the Chiefs, they do not want to play a Joe Burrow-led Bengals team. And so if the Bengals win this game, it's huge. I think they hold on to Trey Hendrickson if they're able to get the victory. If they lose, I think it really damages their opportunity to make it to the playoffs. And from a football operations standpoint, Trey Hendrickson wanted a contract extension. The Bengals didn't give it to him. He wanted to stay there long term. All they did was increase and guarantee his pay for 2025. But beyond this year, Trey Hendrickson is not under contract. So what Cincinnati could do is trade him away, get some value back for a player who they would otherwise lose for nothing if he left in free agency. And I think that the Niners would be very, very interested in Hendrickson if that were the case. They have some pretty good draft capital loaded up for 2026 and for 2027. And at this point of the year, the price tag for Hendrickson is not going to come close to Myles Garrett. I know that Hendrickson the last 2 years has had more sacks than Garrett. If you combine the numbers from 2023 and 2024, where Hendrickson had 17 and a half sacks in each of those 2 seasons. But Myles Garrett is a generational player, and he's one of the best players in the history of the NFL. So I think you could get Hendrickson for a 3 and a player, maybe a 2 and a 3 if you need to increase the price tag. And I think the Niners would be interested in a move like that. Obviously, if they did that, I think that they should prioritize signing him to a long-term deal, 3-4 years at this point of his career. And if you did do that, there's a scenario where he, Nick Bosa, Mykel Williams, they can all share the field at the same time because they can play defensive tackle, all of them, and they can play defensive end. As far as the Eagles going after Myles Garrett, I think 3 ones is too rich.
Yeah.
But if it's 2 first-round picks and a third, I think Howie Roseman might pounce because I think that's a move that makes them Super Bowl favorites right away. I think it puts them over the other teams that they're competing with in the NFC, namely the Packers and the Detroit Lions, who have 2 immobile quarterbacks. And we know that Howie Roseman is uber aggressive. Philadelphia also has 3 third-round picks for next year, so they've got some picks to play with there.
Well, and they're going to be late firsts if they are first-round picks. That is interesting.
See,
I think
here's my thing with that, though.
it.
Let me just say that real quick. Like, everybody's like, oh, the value of the late first rounders, like they're not that valuable. I totally disagree because you think about the picks that the Eagles have made in the first 3 rounds, right, over the last couple of years. They got Quinyon Mitchell at 22. They got Cooper DeJean in the second round. They got Nolan Smith at 30. They got Jahad Campbell at 31. They got Cam Jurgens, their starting center, in the second round. They got Landon Dickerson, their starting left guard, in the second round. They got Jalix Hunt in the third round. So I put a lot of value in those 1 to 4 round picks because you can really get some starters and primary players. So I actually do think they're pretty valuable, especially for a Browns team that has so many holes and would be looking to rebuild at that point.
I mean, here's the thing. Players are worth more than picks because there's a failure rate to picks.
Exactly. Well said.
But picks also give you an opportunity to build in any direction, and you're much more fluid. I'd rather have picks than one veteran player. If I were Cleveland, I mean, to me, if I'm Cleveland, I would much rather have 3 number ones than Myles Garrett, who every day is going, what the fuck am I doing here? Why am I still here? Maybe I don't want to be here. Especially if you're going nowhere, and they appear to be going nowhere. Now, if Myles Garrett were 22, it'd be one thing, but he's closer to 32. So, it's probably, I mean, he's 26 or 28 or something like that. He's probably somewhere in there. But, I 3 number ones is a lot. And maybe you don't, not you, but maybe people don't value number 1 picks, but NFL GMs treat them like gold bullion. And there's absolutely no way they're 3 number ones, even for a great player, I think is too high. Now, interestingly enough, John Hendrickson, John Lynch went on the radio yesterday and was asked about, are you guys still in the market for a trade? And he said, we got 2 things going on. We don't want to give away our 2026 draft, and we want a guy who we have beyond this year because we kind of know. I mean, he didn't say, hey, we know this year could go up in smoke, but that's the reality. They know that this year could not be the year. They've already lost Bosa. They've already lost Warner. They don't want to go all in for Trey Hendrickson, give up a second round pick and have him play 5 games or 6 games with the Niners, and that's all you get for your second round pick.
Right.
So I think there has to be some kind of understanding with his agent that they're going to see that he's going to sign with the 49ers beyond this year. If that were the case, I think the Niners probably should be in the mode, Chase, to move a second round pick. You're saying it might take a third or a player, but I'd move a second round pick for Trey Hendrickson. This is a franchise that has spent second round picks on Dante Pettis and Drake Jackson. You know, I mean, who are we fooling here? You don't want Trey Hendrickson now, who's like, the other thing I think Lynch is after the Chase Young debacle, and I'll call it a debacle because anytime you trade for somebody that coasts in the NFC Championship game, that's a debacle. He did play hard in the Super Bowl after I called his ass out, but he actually had to be called out. I mean, that was unbelievable. I mean, he dogged it in the NFC Championship game. That brought a lot of embarrassment to John Lynch. I know that for a fact. And John doesn't want that again. So John's not going to acquire the Devondre Campbells of the world who maybe they care, maybe they don't, maybe they want it, maybe they don't. Hendrickson is unique in this regard because he cares so damn much. Yeah. You know what I mean? His motor is so unbelievable.
Fits the Niners culture so
well. I mean, he plays with his hair on fire. If anything, he would play maybe even harder than some of the other guys. So I think he's a fit from that perspective. I don't think they want to spend any significant draft capital to bring anybody into the room who's talented but is going to coast. I think he's really concerned about that. But I also think that Shanahan and Lynch are kind of in that mode where they don't want to just add a piece. They want to, if they're going to trade anything significant, if they're going to move from the 6th round to the 7th round, they'll add marginal players on the margins. But they're not going to give you a 4th round pick or anything higher unless they're getting a difference-making player. And how many true difference makers are there? I'm sure that's why Howie Roseman, if he is contemplating Myles Garrett, the reason he is because that's a difference maker. And also I think Howie's thinking, let me block Brad whatever in Detroit from getting him. I think that's his big fear. He doesn't want to have to defend Garrett and Hutchinson against Detroit in the playoffs. I think he looks at that as like, that could be bad. So I think that's what the Eagles are thinking. And I think the Niners, I think they ought to, the way that Les Snead transitioned from I'm making picks to I'm trading for veterans. I think the Niners ought to do it too. That's the safest thing you can do when you're almost there is to add veterans, because veterans, there's no risk. Draft picks, it's like, well, he might play, he might not be able to play. He might fit, he might not fit. Hendrickson fits. Hendrickson's going to play. He's going to play well. He's going to play hard. So there's a lot less risk. And so, instead of missing on your second round pick, you're hitting. So I know that's a high pick to give up, but I would do it.
You mentioned the Rams. Think about what they did, right? Traded for Matthew Stafford, veteran. Traded for Von Miller, veteran. Traded for Jalen Ramsey, veteran. What did it result in? It resulted in a Super Bowl. Now, obviously, the years after that, they were a little bit rough, but thanks to Sean McVay being a fantastic coach, they were still a highly competitive team, and they've made it to the playoffs, at least 3 years in a row. And last year, they gave the Eagles a really good game, which came down to the wire. And if you're the Niners, obviously Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have talked about how they want to bring in a player, obviously, who can help them this year, help them for the future. Well, if you trade for Trey Hendrickson, just pay him. I mean, the other players who you're paying on the defense, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Diamador Lenore, that is it. Everybody else is on a rookie contract or cheap. So you can afford to pay a Trey Hendrickson, who's a game changer now and a game changer in the future. And if you're so worried about the future, which obviously when you're running a business, you have to be cognizant of not mortgaging your future, or at least understanding of what it could do to your future. But look, the Niners haven't won a Super Bowl since the 1994 season. All right. And they've been close, but they haven't gotten the ring back to Santa Clara, to San Francisco, to the Bay Area. You get that 6th Super Bowl, It requires making bold moves, and bold, aggressive businesses, they're the ones that win. That's why Howie Roseman and the Eagles have won 2 rings since 2017. That's why some of these teams that we're talking about right now are in contention, because they've made those bold, splashy moves. And you also make a good point. Like, John Lynch might be hesitant because of Chase Young, and he's given contract extensions to Brock Purdy, Fred Warner, George Kittle. They've all gotten hurt. Look, that is the reality of football, right? Injuries are going to happen. Parity is going to happen. Sometimes moves don't work out, but you're in a wide open NFC right now. You are 3-0 inside the NFC West. You win this division with 3 divisional games left. You're hosting a playoff game. You win that playoff game at Levi's, you're 1 game away from the NFC Championship game. You get to the NFC title game, anything can happen in a game like that, of that magnitude, with that much pressure. And then you're 1 game away from playing in Super Bowl 60 at your house. So I think the Niners should be aggressive. I think they should obviously be smart. It shouldn't end, though, with Keion White. They have to make another move. And if you trade for Keion White, you add Cleveland Ferrell, who played well for this team in 2023. You get Yetur Gross-Matos back. You get Bryce Huff back. You trade for another player. All of a sudden, this defensive line, which had 2 healthy players on the team a couple of days ago at defensive end, that becomes a deeper unit, which then helps out the rest of your defense. Then you get Brandon Ayuk back, and this offense can catch a stride. Then the Niners down the stretch run really become a dangerous team.
It's interesting. You know, what's interesting is that we don't know who's actually available and who's not.
Yeah.
You know, I talked to some people from New York, obviously, this week with the Niners playing the New York Giants, and they swear that Kayvon Thibodeau is not available. There's talk out of the Jets world that maybe that they're listening to offers on Quinnen Williams, which would, I mean, God knows he's a difference maker. I mean, I'd be very interested in Quinnen Williams. But then I just saw a report this morning that the Jets are not wanting to trade Will McDonald, who I think is very, in a lot of ways, could be the perfect piece. In a lot of ways, he's a younger version of Bryce Huff and would be fantastic in this defense at you know, bending the edge. But they are shopping Jermaine Johnson. So and then I've heard Jermaine Johnson, that the Jets asking price for Jermaine Johnson is a 2nd round pick. Well, if the Jets are wanting a 2nd round pick for Jermaine Johnson and the Bengals want a 2nd round pick for Trey Hendrickson, you know, who would you rather have? You know, I mean, both guys I think are headed to free agency. So, you know, I think Hendrickson, I think the Niners would, you know, I don't know if they can pay Hendrickson and Bosa, but I think they would like Hendrickson. But I don't think, the question is, are they willing to trade a day 2 pick in next year's draft for Trey Hendrickson? I think they should. Lynch said on the radio that they don't want to give away next year's draft. I wonder if it would be any different if they said, hey, would you trade a 2nd round pick in 27? Would that, you think that would change the equation at all?
I think it would change it too, because I think a team who gets a pick back, they want to kind of like get the ball rolling on that rebuilding process as soon as possible and not have to wait until 2027. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, then it's a matter of, you know, can they make this deal at all? To me, the game plan for this game has got to be run the ball. Now, I think it's going to be Mac Jones. Do you have a thought on Brock Purdy? I mean, yesterday Kubiak told us that Brock's getting really frustrated. And I don't doubt it, dude. I feel like I know Brock Purdy. I feel like you probably feel like you know Brock Purdy. He's not one of these guys that, he's not like the international man of mystery. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. He's pretty much consistent and very similar, very much the same guy every day, right? So I do feel like I know him. And I can tell you, Chase, this guy is absolutely being tortured right now by this toe injury, because he understands the dynamic. He knows that everybody's pointing the finger. He knows he got paid. He knows everybody's expecting him to lead. He's ready and wanting to lead. He looked amazing in July, throwing the ball down the field with power and strength and accuracy. He looked really, really good almost all summer. Now this turf toe thing has robbed him. I think it's sapped him of his arm strength, his accuracy, his mobility. It's like ruined his winning equation and rendered him, you know, a backup in his own locker room and silenced his voice as a leader on his own team. I mean, it's just I'm sure he's just absolutely sick about the situation. I still think that the Niners ought to show some discipline here. Don't play him until the bye week comes and goes. And then just say, Brock, look, the season has been a tire fire, but let's give this injury plenty of time to heal, even a few more weeks than we need to. And let's get you out there for the final 4 weeks of the regular season, because I think he's their best quarterback. And if you could wait till after the bye week, you will have given the injury all the time in the world to heal. If it's not healed then it's just not going to heal and he needs surgery. But that would be my plan. I'm not playing him this week. I asked Kubiak about him the other day. He's like, yeah, he's looking good. It's like, he's still limited in practice. Let's take more. They rushed him back. They already did the rush back. Don't rush him back again. Let it play out. Wait until the week 14 bye. Bring him back for the final 4 weeks of the regular season. And if he's healthy, great. You make a run. If he's not healthy, at least you can throw up your hands to the fan base and say, hey, look, we did everything in our power. They said rest him for 5 to 6 weeks, 6 to 7 weeks. We gave it 8, 9 weeks. It just didn't happen. You know what I mean? But if like Shanahan and Lynch this week, when asked about, well, could you bring him back this week on the MetLife turf? They're like, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, I'm not sure if that's just something they're saying because that's the way they want to say it. But Chase, you talk to Niner fans for a living. I talk to Niner fans for a living. John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, if they put Brock Purdy on the field at MetLife this weekend and he had a serious recurrence of that injury and was out for the year, Niner fans, right or wrong, will blame the leadership for putting him out there. To me, they should not be so cavalier about, well, yeah, we could put him out there. Or is that just what they're saying? But they in no way in hell they would actually do it because they act like they would do it. Grant is saying this morning, by the way, that if Brock Purdy suits up in this game, that's a bad look.
I disagree.
You disagree? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Give me your thoughts on Purdy and the situation with the toe.
Well, there's a good word that you used, discipline. And the 49ers should exercise discipline with this decision. Why? Because they didn't going into week 4. They didn't exercise discipline going into week 4. Brock Purdy played against the Jags. And right from the start of that game, Kyle Shanahan said he got injured during it. But right at the start of that game, you could tell Brock Purdy was not 100%. Why do we know that? Well, he was moving around very gingerly on his foot, very soft on his foot. He was very scared and timid to plant his foot and run around. He wasn't the same mobile, athletic quarterback that we've been accustomed to seeing, right? And then as far as throwing the football, he was leaving all of his throws high. He was overthrowing his guys. That led to tip passes and interceptions and turnovers and misses all day long. And by them not exercising discipline with that decision, what happened? Well, we're now going into week 9. We have not seen Brock Purdy since. So this turf toe injury, it's finicky, it's tricky, it's complex. Kyle Shanahan emphasized that this week. I've been saying this for a really long time. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, but I pay attention to these things because you and I have to. There is a very high risk of re-aggravation with a turf toe. You step in one direction, you try to make a cut, you plant your foot, you get tackled, you get stepped on, and boom, your season could be over. Brock Purdy suffered his turf toe in week 1, tried to come back in week 4, got hurt again. Joe Burrow suffered his turf toe in week 2. He is out until December because he needs surgery. It's a very problematic injury and one that's very hard to come back off of. So I agree. The Niners need to exercise discipline with this Purdy decision. And bringing him out and playing him against the Giants on that turf, against that defensive line, with your offensive line, I think would be an idiotic decision because if he gets hurt again, everybody's going to be pointing fingers and we're going to have the same conversation that we had after week 4. And that conversation is, what a dumb decision to play him when he wasn't ready. So if you give him another week, he can come back against the Rams. He can play on one of the finest grass surfaces in the NFL, the site of Super Bowl 60 at Levi's Stadium. It gives him more time to heal, more time to strengthen that toe. And I think that's the best move. You've shown that you can win games with Mac Jones. He's 4-2. But if you lose Purdy for the rest of the year, it does cap what you can accomplish this year. Because we've seen that in the games that Mac has lost, pressure has really gotten to him. And the teams with really good defensive lines have pressured him, and it's really impacted this Niners offense where they turn it over. The pass game hasn't been operating well, and they can't run it. Well, with Purdy, he can bail this offensive line out like he has the last few years since he came to San Francisco. He can run around, he can create plays, and he's clearly the better quarterback than Mac Jones. So even if he suits up as a backup, I think that's a move that's fine, right? It clearly shows that should he be starting this game and play the entire duration of the game against this Giants team on that turf? Yeah, probably not. But in an emergency situation in which Mac Jones got hurt, could you put Brock Purdy out there, and could you be very conservative with your play calling, how he moves around to try to limit any damage to that toe? I think that's probably the best move. Plus, if Purdy is like in a spot where he can play, would you rather have him as the backup or Adrian Martinez? You'd rather have Brock Purdy as the backup. So I think, yes, being conservative, being safe is the best move here. If Purdy comes back against the Rams in week 10 for this stretch run, you're hoping that he can stay healthy and he just makes your offense better.
Yeah, I think Purdy's the better quarterback, but I don't want to see the Niner front office blamed for this. It's an injury. It's a tricky injury. As you said, they tried to rush him back. It didn't work. Now take more time. Nobody's going to say if Brock Purdy comes back in week 15 after the bye week and plays the rest of the year healthy and plays well in the playoffs, nobody's going to be like, they brought him back 2 weeks too late. Nobody's going to say that. But if they bring him back this week and he hurts himself on that turf, there'll be a lot of people that say the Niners rushed him back twice and now have lost him for the year. And I think it's really going to play quite a bit different, and you're going to potentially lose your quarterback. So I'd give him more time. I'd just give him more time. I'm sure he's feeling a little bit better. And guess what? He'll feel even better if you give it, another month. I mean, the what you don't want is the recurrence. If you have a recurrence, now you're set back. Now you might be looking at a surgical result. You don't want that. By the way, the Dolphins lost last night to get this week rolling to the Ravens, and today they fired their general manager. Adam Schefter is reporting that Mike McDaniel is going to remain as the Dolphins head coach for the remainder of the season. Sounds like he's probably done at the end of the year, but Chris Greer was dumped today as the GM of the Dolphins. Well, the interim Dolphins GM, I'm getting Flip Birds by Tim Ryan. Tim Ryan right there in the other room flipping me birds. Are the Dolphins suddenly going to make trades? Are there players on the Dolphins that you would have interest in? Do you want Bradley Chubb? Do you want Jalen Phillips? Do you want Jalen Waddle? Do you want, they've got a number of interesting guys over there. They've been supposedly stonewalling teams saying they're not going to trade. Now they just dumped the GM. Does the interim come in and make a bunch of trades? Would you call the Dolphins? Is there anybody that you would like to pick off from Miami for the Niners or Eagles for that matter?
Yeah, this is very interesting for Miami because their interim GM is now going to make all of the decisions going into the deadline, and he might not be the GM next year. This is why bad operations and bad organizations stay bad. I mean, I know Chris Greer has been there for a while, and he hasn't really put together a good football team. They haven't won a playoff game since, the early 2000s, late 90s. But now you're tasking an interim GM with making pivotal moves for the future of your organization, and you don't know if he's going to be the GM for the future. So what is this new GM going to be handed? It's not really a great job now. I don't think it's a great job in the future, and I feel bad for Mike McDaniel at this point, even though he hasn't done himself any favors because he's kind of lost the locker room, and that's the danger of starting off as the player's buddy, and then once you need to crack the whip and get everybody in line, they're like, nah, we're not falling for that because that shows that you are fake and you haven't been about that the whole time. As far as some of the Dolphins trade targets, there are different ones, obviously. Bradley Chubb is a veteran who is very well accomplished. And if the Niners want a veteran type of player, I think he makes a lot of sense. He's playing at a really high level this year. The key with him, no more guaranteed money left on his contract. And so if it didn't work out, the Niners could cut bait, and all they'd have to give up is what they pay him for the rest of the year and the draft capital that they surrender. You look at a player like Jalen Phillips, tore his Achilles last year. He's back, really starting to turn the corner in that recovery. He's been playing okay all year, but there have been some flashes of him turning back to the player who he was pre-injury. He's a younger player who's a long, physical, twitchy, athletic freak. You look at the safety spot. Malik Mustafa, Jair Brown, Jason Pinnock, Marquise Siegel, they've all kind of struggled this year. Is Minkah Fitzpatrick available? It's one of the best safeties in the NFL. Multi-time All-Pro and Pro Bowler, an absolute ball hawk, and I think that he would be an intriguing option. So 2 defensive ends and a safety could be available. I don't think the Niners are going to be in the market for a guy like Jalen Waddle, but I do think with 2 wins and with as bad and as ugly as that loss was on Thursday Night Football, it's going to put the Dolphins into fire sale mode. And that loss was huge for other teams in the NFL who have needs because they're following the Dolphins closely in what they do.
Sometimes at the trade deadline, things happen and you just don't bank on it. Like you're thinking, you're not thinking somebody would be traded and all of a sudden they are traded. And that sometimes, you never know. I mean, like sometimes there'll be a name that's not in the rumor mill that gets dealt. I stream on Thursday nights with this guy, Sterling Bennett, and he had an interesting idea and one that I really love. I'm going to put this one on the screen. This is kind of unique. I haven't seen anybody. He's proposing a deal with Tennessee, and here it is. He's suggesting this. He said, "Will the 49ers entertain the idea of trading for defensive tackle T'Vondre Sweat from the Tennessee Titans instead of an edge rusher? 24 years old, second-round pick, signed through 2027, solid pass rusher next to Collins, Elliott, Givens, Davis, impending free agents." It is interesting. The Niners don't really have their anchor point defensive tackle. That's why I think Quinnen Williams is an interesting name. I'll say this. A lot of people are like, oh, the Niners ought to just sit it out. I think the Niners ought to be active at the trade deadline, whether they're going for it this year but I do think it would be like the ideal trade for the Niners is that they acquire a significant player that can really help them, a difference-making player, but that they control and that's going to be part of their team going forward. They traded for Trent Williams. Well, he wasn't a one-year deal. He's been here for years. They traded for Christian McCaffrey. He's not a one-year deal. He's on the team for years. So I don't necessarily think they have to get somebody who's a free agent at the end of the year. If they got a building block piece like this guy, this guy's a monster in the middle. I mean, I loved him at Texas, and he's been better in the pros. What do you think of T'Vondre Sweat? What do you think of the idea of the Niners going for a defensive tackle? What do you think of the idea of the Niners going for kind of a younger player that that could be not a guy that's here for this year, but a guy that's here for the foreseeable future and just kind of continue to build? Because I'd do it if I could.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, I was talking about the possibility of adding a Jeffrey Simmons if the Titans were to trade him away, and he's long been one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL for a little while there. I thought he was number 2 behind Chris Jones, and he's still probably top 5. I think the Titans are going to hold on to him, but even though that wouldn't be making a move for a defensive end, what does it do? It makes a move to help out your pass rush. And so Simmons is different because he's making a ton of money and he's an older player, probably not quite who he once was, but he's still playing at a really high level this year. T'Vondre Sweat is a player who I did like coming out of Texas, but there were some concerns from me about whether or not he was a 2-down player or a 3-down player because he was so big and so massive. And those are the same questions I had about Jordan Davis when he was coming out of Georgia. In the first few years of his career, he wasn't in good enough shape to be a 3-down player. So he was more of that 2-down guy. T'Vondre Sweat has played really well to start his career. I think the big thing there, under contract through 2027, I like his game. And then you think about a defensive tackle rotation for now and in the future of Alfred Collins, huge. T'Vondre Sweat, huge. They used to play together at Texas. And then you have CJ West, who was a healthy scratch last week. And I think his development is stalling a little bit, but I'm still a believer in the player. And then also keep in mind that Bryce Huff's going to come back against the Rams. Yeturgos Matos hopefully can come back soon. You added Cleveland Ferrell. You added Keon White. And so a move like that, while it not being for a pass rusher at defensive end traditionally, does enhance your pass rush. So I wouldn't be against it.
Let's hit our Habbas Law supers here. Thanks to Habbas Law for being a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. Check them out. 1-800-INJURED. They will fight to make it right. Big fans of Habbas Law. They're a sponsor of the Krug Show and have been for since this season, and we're big fans. Omar and Tarek Habbas are great guys. They're rooted here in the community. If you need someone in your corner to help fight the insurance companies, Habbas Law is for you. Habbas Law, they will fight to make it right. Visit them on the web, habbaslaw.com, Habbas law.com. What I love about Habbas Law also is they're rooted in the community. And if you go check this out, there's a link in the description. If you want tickets to San Jose State, Hawaii, it's a game that's being presented by our good friends at Habbas Law. They're sponsoring the game. It's tomorrow at San Jose State. And San Jose State and Hawaii, 7:30 kickoff. We have tickets available. So if you want, you can sign up in the links in the description, sign up and get some tickets to San Jose State and Hawaii, courtesy of Habbas Law. And thanks to Habbas Law for being a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. We appreciate them a lot. All right, let's hit some supers. We're going to get out of here a little early today because Shanahan's talking. I just saw 12, not 12:30. So I got to get over there. But let's hit some supers, and here they are. We got this one from David. Larry, nice job asking direct and critical questions yesterday. I think it's good the coaches know their game plan was clearly flawed for future success and adjustments. I asked Kubiak, I said, did you feel like you helped Colton McKivitz enough? He said, we chipped, but, obviously didn't chip enough. McKivitz got killed by Anderson on Sunday. And then I said to Saul, I said, your offensive rush plan and your coverage plan did not mesh. They weren't linked up there. I said, and I just talked to him in a pure football sense. I'm not going to sit there and try to know every call. I'm just telling you, I watched the freaking game and there was too much space between the receivers and the coverage. And there's no reason in the world that the Niners would Demo Lenore, Upton Stout, Renardo Green. Those three guys are better athletes than Xavier Hutchinson, Jalen Knoll, and Jaden Higgins. They should have been in those guys' hip pocket all freaking day. Instead, they played soft and they allowed Stroud to get into a pitch and catch deal, and he burned him. And so I got to ask some tough questions sometime. I have no agenda, but at the same time, I'm not a glad handing guy sitting there going, hey, give me a 4, give me a 9, give me an E, give me an R. Come on. This is, sorry, I don't want to be critical, but at the same time, I got to be critical. Anthony Catania says, another great show, guys. Run the damn ball. Thank you, Anthony. That is the plan. Check out Anthony's Sharp Corners, Sports Cards and Collectibles, 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove, California, along the Monterey Peninsula. Anthony's at 831-521-5264. And Joseph Ernberg says, get Trey. Oh, yeah, right. Quinnen and McDonald. The first won't be an offensive lineman. Okay. I'm thinking next year's first better be an offensive lineman. Chase, I'll give you the final word. What's your prediction in this game? I'm saying the score is going to be 28-13. If the Niners win 28-13, put the Niners back in the Super Bowl tournament and let's go. If the Giants win 28-13, the Niners season has been dealt a serious blow.
Yeah, man, Jackson Dart does such a great job of being able to extend plays out of structure. And so pass rush lane discipline and the overall pass rush is going to be huge in this game. The Giants are also awful against the run. So I think Kyle Shanahan's going to have that same game plan and mentality that he had going into the Falcons game. Let's try to get to 40 runs. And if the Giants can't stop the Niners ground game, that's obviously going to open up the pass game for Mac Jones. Hopefully we see a little bit more of Jordan Watkins to give San Francisco more of a vertical presence and a speed presence on the field. Then I like the Niners' chances of winning this game. But if it's a repeat of last week where they can't protect with their offensive line, can't get after the quarterback, I think it could be a long day for San Francisco. But I do think the Niners win this game in a close one.
Good to see you, man. Have a great weekend. Everybody check out Chat Sports. Chase does the in-game watch party. Look for that Sunday morning, 10 o'clock on the West Coast, 1 o'clock on the East Coast. Chase, we'll talk to you next week, man. Always good to see you, and have a good weekend, man.
Yep, you as well. Appreciate
all you guys. I'm back on KNBR tonight at 6. See you then.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful.